Good evening, afternoon, morning, middle of the night, or whatever it is, wherever you are. My name is Keith Palmgren, and welcome to the CYA by using the CIA correctly for a change. The cover your assets by using the confidentiality, integrity, availability, what we normally think of as a triad. We're going to debunk that a bit tonight. But before we get to that, again, my name is Keith Palmgren. I am a senior SANS instructor. As you can see, there is an awful lot of alphabet soup after my name. And you see my email address there. You also see my Twitter handle in case you're interested. But the email address every student I have ever had, over 25,000 of you now, have a standing for life invitation to send me questions via email. And if I can possibly help you out, I am more than happy to do so. No, I will not design your entire security architecture via email. And yes, I have been asked to do that kind of thing. But if you're trying to understand a topic or a term or something of that nature, shoot me an email and we'll work on it and we'll see if we can come up with something that helps you out. Also, notice up in the corner you see a QR code and also a link to a tinyurl.com/ch37OAT. Notice that is a lowercase o. But those will take you to a Dropbox folder I have shared to the world. I only put things up there if I am okay with everybody having it. So this presentation, my other 3 or 4 night talks are also up there, as well as a whole lot of other stuff. Just kind of put that stuff up there, and my students and so forth, colleagues and so on, can download and make use of it. If you find something up there that you feel has value, you have my permission to share it with colleagues and so on. I do ask that you don't try to profit from the stuff I'm giving away for free up there. I had someone try that about 4 or 5 years ago, so I guess I have to say that now, unfortunately. But so this talk, we've all heard of the CIA, the confidentiality, integrity, availability. We're going to get into some discussion about that, but part of what this talk is really about, our agenda here for this evening, we are going to try to debunk some of the conventional thinking that goes around the CIA. Now, you might be asking, okay, who is this character, Keith, and why does he think he gets to do that? Well, I've been doing this stuff, and by stuff, I mean computers and network in general, but security in particular. I specialized in security from day one, and I've been doing this for over 35 years. I started my career when I joined the Air Force, the United States Air Force, in January 1985, working with crypto keys and codes, as well as the very brand new computer security program that they had just started up back in the 1986-87 timeframe. Worked in that for a while. I was at AT&T as a security consultant. I built and ran the first security consulting practice for Sprint. I've been doing my own consulting practice for over 20 years now. And through all of that, working with various clients, government sector, private sector, U.S., international, law enforcement, you name it, I figured a few things out. In most cases, because I've tried to follow conventional wisdom and found out that it did not work. So that's kind of where some of this talk came from. Now, basically, our agenda for this evening, we're going to do a quick review of the CIA. If you're attending this talk, you probably know what I mean when I say CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page and seeing it with where I'm coming from, we'll do a quick little review. And then I want to introduce this pie chart expedient that I'm going to use to try to make some points throughout the talk here. We will look at the pie chart with various companies, and I'm just choosing more or less at random, and then by sector, by department, and we'll finish up with some Q&A. Now, this talk, I've done this talk a number of times in live events, and it sometimes is over in 45 minutes, and it is sometimes over in an hour to an hour and 5. It depends on that final bullet, the Q&A, how many questions we have, and so forth. But notice the little whiteboard over here on the side. Our to-do list tonight is to learn. And part of that means we need to interact. And it's not just me talking to you, it's also you asking questions, making suggestions, telling me I'm wrong if that's how you feel. But so exactly, how long we will be here this evening, it does vary somewhat, very much depending, well, actually more on you than on me, okay? But so we can also agree to disagree. Not everyone is going to agree with everything I say here tonight. Okay, and that is perfectly okay. The purpose of this talk is to make you think, to make you, as our whiteboard says here, to make you question everything. There's a lot of value in that. Sometimes I may make you think about things you've never even considered before. In other cases, I may make you think about old things in new ways. But in either case, whether at the end of the day, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, that's okay. If I have made you walk away from this presentation thinking things through in new and different ways and so forth, then there is value in that. Just simply making you think. There's a lot of value there. And during our Q&A session, maybe you'll make me think a little bit too. It has been known to happen. Okay. Now, the CYA, let's just do a quick little review. I think we know confidentiality, only those who are supposed to have access to something should have access to it. The integrity, the data must be kept in a pristine and accurate fashion. And of course, the availability, the resource has to be accessible and usable or it's not doing you very much good. And so we know that our security programs want to address confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And when we look at how this is viewed around the industry, whether you're talking CISSP, Security Plus, or pretty much anything else out there, any kind of training classes or anything like that you might go to, you're going to hear this discussed as the CIA triad. Triad defined as 3 equal parts. So I'm going to try to address all 3 of those in equal parts, okay? And the CIA triad, it is commonly touted as the proper way of doing things. Well, part of what we are here today to try to accomplish, we're going to shatter that notion that the CIA triad is the proper way, that the triad part of it is proper. We have to do this. We have to understand where the thinking originates, okay? And where it really kind of came from, and I've looked into this as hard as I can, this terminology of CIA triad really kind of seems to originate with the CISSP exam. Now, please understand, I hold a CISSP, active CISSP certification. I've held that certification since 1998. I'm proud of the certification, etc. I'm certainly not bashing on CISSP. But you kind of have to understand where it came from. The original CISSP questions were written in 1988, 1989, and 1990 by a gentleman named Mike Corby. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, Mike is a good friend of mine and my former boss. I used to work for him. But he would be the first, believe me, I'm not bashing on Mike. As I say, he's a good friend of mine, and he used to be my boss. So this is not intended in any way to bash Mike, his certification, or anything else. It's simply analyzing one small piece of it, okay? But he would be the first one to tell you that he really kind of designed the CISSP as a certification for perfect world security. And the things that he put in, and his team put into the CISSP certification test pretty much became conventional wisdom. I can give you several examples if you would like. But the problem with conventional wisdom, it's not always wise, okay? Well, as an example, there's a place out there, I call it Keith's Perfect World. And in Keith's Perfect World, everybody gets 800% of their staffing requests, 900% of their budget requests. And Keith's Perfect World is an amazingly lonely place. In fact, nobody actually lives there. We all live in the real world where we're going to get 50% of our staffing requests, 20% of our budget requests, and that's if we're lucky, okay? So in other words, we never have the resources necessary to implement the CYA as a triad of 3 equal parts. And I speak from knowledge, okay? I have tried it because I learned it this way, CYA triad, clear back in the early 90s when I first started hearing the term and running into it. And that's how I learned it, to implement it as 3 equal parts. And so I went into client after client after client, both when I was running the practice like a sprint and then again in my own practice and so forth. And we have tried repeatedly to implement the CYA triad in 3 equal parts, and in every case, we failed because the organization ran out of funds before we could succeed. There just simply didn't have the people and the budget to be able to do that. And eventually I figured out that the triad piece of the CYA triad is an unattainable ideal. That doesn't mean that the CYA is bad. It means that attempting to implement it as a triad is a mistake. Okay, and so this talk here tonight, we're going to see how we can still use CYA to very good effect, but not try to obtain an unattainable ideal. Okay, now kind of an expedient that I'm going to be using here tonight, I'm going to use this CYA pie chart, if you will, and I'm going to break it up in 3 different colors, as you can see, with red being for confidentiality, green for integrity, blue for availability. Colors don't really mean anything. I just needed 3 colors, so I picked those 3. Now, when I first did this talk the very first time, a gentleman came up afterwards and said, "Great talk, but I am colorblind. I can only see shades of gray." So that was kind of tough for me. I said, "Wow, I didn't think of that." So I threw the C, the I, and the A in there to help out as well, okay? But so we're going to, weight these 3 with different companies. With this company, we give more weight to the confidentiality piece and the availability piece and so on. And we'll use this simple pie chart as an expedient to illustrate and demonstrate this, okay? Now, the specific percentages just are not the point here. We're not going to get bogged down on the weeds here. Should that be a 49% or a 50%? We're not going there. Okay, that's really not what this is. But, and again, some of you are going to completely disagree with my weighting, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm not saying I'm perfect in every occasion, and believe me, my wife can give you a long list of times when I've gotten it wrong, okay? So it does happen. Now, I needed some companies to use as examples here. So, nothing special about these companies. They're just some, large, pretty well-known companies. Coca-Cola, the largest soft drink maker in the world, obviously. We'll talk more about Ball when we get to them, but if you're familiar with them, they're a very significant company in their industry sector, the largest in their industry sector. Chase, a large U.S. bank, obviously. Pfizer, the largest pharmaceutical company. Exxon Mobil, largest oil and gas company. And I think you might have heard of Amazon. They do some online sales a little bit. They also do some tech, some clouds, some things like that. But so like I say, I needed some companies to use as examples. These are the ones I happen to choose, okay? Now, again, in the interest of full disclosure, I've never had a business relationship with any of these companies here. I have never been an employee. I have never been a consultant to one of them. I picked some big, well-known companies, okay? And, what follows here when I show these different pie charts for each of these companies, this is kind of my day one on the job assumption about how they would weight the CYA pie chart. And I'll be the first one to say that as I spend more time in the company and get to understand it better and, kind of become more of an insider instead of an outsider, I probably would change some of my weighting a little bit. I'd probably get some of it wrong and I need to make some adjustments, okay? This is simply based on an outsider's view of those companies, okay? So understand kind of where this came from. Now, with that, let's take a look at some pie charts here. So when we take a look at Coca-Cola, I think it's pretty obvious with the formula for Coca-Cola. There are other companies out there that could make Coke. That is an obviously true statement, okay? And so consequently, the formula for Coca-Cola is notoriously protected. I don't know if you've heard, but 1/3 of the formula is in the control of 3 different executives in 3 different cities, maintained in 3 different vaults. No one person is ever supposed to have access to all 3 pieces, etc. In fact, following the 9/11 attack, one of the company Coca-Cola actually donated a lot of money toward the cleanup, and it was, altruistic to a certain extent, but it was also done because 1/3 of their formula was in a vault in the basement of one of the World Trade Center towers, and they wanted to get that formula back, and that was also part of that equation as well. Okay, but so they do protect that formula pretty carefully. Okay, one of the most carefully protected formulas in the world. If you ever watch how stuff's made and how companies like this protect their formulas, that's the piece of, all of the How Stuff Made shows are fantastic, and I just will sit there and watch them for hours because I'm kind of weird that way. But when they start talking about how they protect their formulas, that's when I really set up and start taking notice. But there's also other products that they make, other sports drinks and so forth. And then, of course, they're always doing research and development on new products. So consequently, when I take a look at the Coca-Cola company, I'm probably going to give confidentiality by far the biggest piece of the pie. Integrity is going to come in a strong second. They want Coke to taste like Coke. And some of you that are closer to my age might remember 1985, they called it New Coke. Oh my word. They came up with a new formula for Coca-Cola and put it out. It didn't taste the same. And people were so upset, and they figured out the integrity of that formula needs to be, that Coke needs to taste like Coke. That's what they kind of figured out from that. Availability is a pretty distant third. I mean, yeah, they do want to have their, be able to access their formulas and so forth. They do want to have that. But when you compare the importance of availability to the other two, it's a pretty distant third. Okay. Now that's how I would look at the pie chart when we look at a company like Coca-Cola. If we change over and go instead to Ball Corporation, if you're not familiar, you may remember your grandmother, or even, in my case, my mother, canning vegetables out of the garden using Ball canning jars. Okay, well, that is actually now a subsidiary of the Ball Corporation. It's a very small part of their business, making those jars. Their primary business concern now, they make, soda cans. In fact, 2 of their largest customers are named, one is named Coca-Cola and the other is named PepsiCo, or Pepsi. Okay, so when you walk down the soda aisle in your local grocery store, pretty much every can and bottle that you see on the shelves was probably made by the Ball Corporation. And then when you step over to the beer aisle, almost all the beer cans and beer bottles were made by Ball. Vegetable cans, soup cans, etc., aerosol cans, jars for jelly, pickles, ketchup, mustard, whatever. Pretty much when you're walking down the aisle in the grocery store, if there is a can or a bottle of any kind, it was probably made by this company. They are by far the largest. Okay. Well, so let's take a look at their pie chart. For the company like that, I'm going to say that availability is going to be our number one concern. When you sign up with a company, just take one example. We just inked a deal with Coca-Cola to make sure that they have enough bottles and cans to put their soda into. Just that one contract alone, the service level agreements for, how many cans and bottles we have to deliver on a daily basis and so on, the numbers are astronomical. They are mind-boggling, and that is just one of their many customers. So availability, they actually have something like 36 factories around the globe, and making soda cans and all kinds of cans and bottles all the time. It's actually a much larger operation than you might imagine. Integrity, it matters. QA, quality assurance for their, their products. When they give the soda maker or whatever some bottles and cans, they do have to meet certain requirements. And confidentiality, though, how you make a bottle or a can is a kind of well-known thing. Okay. Now, I don't know if you recall, but back when I first began this, I said some of you may disagree with some of what I say. And that actually happened here from this slide. I had a gentleman come up to me after the presentation. He didn't call me out in front of anybody, but he was at one of our SANS conferences, and he happens to be a vice president at the Ball Corporation. And he said, you came pretty close. He said, but one thing you should be aware of, in our R&D facility, confidentiality is real important. He said, I can't tell you a lot, and that's proper. He said, but just one example, it's actually pretty well known. He said, do you remember several years ago when Coors Beer came out with these bottles and cans that if the beer was cold enough, the mountains turned blue? He said it was our R&D facility that came up with how to make the mountains turn blue, and the battle between all the beer makers for who was going to get that feature on their bottles and cans was pretty intense. So yeah, he said, yeah, we were protecting that as a trade secret very closely as to how we did that. I found that to be a pretty interesting conversation, and I repeat it, by the way, with his permission, by the way. But so, at least within their R&D facility, within that function, he said he would weight the confidentiality much higher. We're going to come back to that concept here. It's an important concept coming up here. What happens when we start getting into different departments of the company and things like this, okay? Now, when we move into Chase, now this would be our online bank, and I do want to be clear here. I am talking about their online banking. If you can't get to your online bank, it's inconvenient. It's a pain. It's, well, doggone it, I wish it hadn't happened. But it's not the end of the world. If I can see your bank account balance, okay, well, now that's not good, and we certainly don't want that to happen. But if I can change your bank account balance when I'm not supposed to, if I can change it inappropriately, that's really, really bad. That's an integrity issue. Okay, now we should understand how a bank protects that integrity. Your online bank, hopefully, has some good authentication procedures to make sure that only you can get into your bank account. Now, authentication is normally thought of as a more along the lines of a confidentiality measure. I authenticate my users to keep other people off my network so they can't see my stuff. That's a confidentiality measure. And if you talk to most security folks, they would immediately tell you, yeah, authentication is about confidentiality. And it generally is. Well, here in this particular case, though, the online bank is forcing strong authentication in part to protect the confidentiality so that I can't see your bank account balance, but primarily to keep me out of your bank account so that I cannot impact its integrity by inappropriately transferring funds. Okay, so that's how it really comes down. And so here, integrity, obviously our number one concern. Availability, nice to have. Okay, confidentiality does get a significant slice. But now, again, if we change this up, I was very specific in that. I was talking about their online banking. If you go to their stock trading function, if you can't get in and trade your stocks in a timely manner, the fines are very, very huge. So, go to a different area of this organization and you would see a very different pie chart. But in the online banking function in particular, okay, then pharmaceuticals such as Pfizer. The Pfizer's Lipitor patent is actually now the second most valuable in history. Generated $105 billion from 1993 to 2009. That's more than most companies on the S&P 500 generated during the same period of time. That's a very, very valuable formula. Protecting that formula is just absolutely vital. Okay. And so confidentiality is obviously going to be the number one concern here. But their integrity also has to play a pretty close second to this. keeping the pills doing what they're supposed to do. And that actually, believe it or not, most of pharmaceuticals weren't looking at that integrity piece all that hard until, once again, you'd have to go back to the mid 1980s, and I won't be able to give you the exact year on this, but we had an incident where somebody put some poison in some pill bottles in stores, Tylenol bottles in particular, and some people died. And all of a sudden, people went, "Oh gosh, I guess it is possible that the integrity of the medications does kind of matter." And so they stepped that game up a bit. Okay, but I'm going to tell you, I have been in. I teach for the NSA. I have taught for GCHQ, which is basically the British NSA, military bases all over the country and all over the world, in fact. Etc. I've been in some very, very secure government facilities, and I've been in the R&D facilities at pharmaceuticals, and the R&D facilities of pharmaceuticals, their security will trump anything I have ever seen done by the government, including up to and including in one case, 3-person integrity. You could not go anywhere in the R&D facility without 2 people accompanying you. Including to the restroom. You get to know your coworkers quite well. But, they were basically making it so that 3 people would have to agree to steal their formula. Now, one little footnote here, it says here that AbbVie's Humira formula will soon have more total value. As of early this year, AbbVie's Humira has surpassed actually Lipitor. The example is still valid. But AbbVie's Humira is now the most valuable drug in history. Believe it or not, for several years, the most valuable drug in history was Viagra. But Lipitor and Humira have both surpassed it. Now, moving into a oil and gas company such as Exxon Mobil, when you talk to the CEO of a company of that nature, their number one concern is to keep the oil flowing. And of course, getting the oil turned into gas, or whatever the products is that they're having to be putting out. So protecting the R&D on the oil deposits, like where is the oil underneath the Gulf of Mexico, is just one example. The research that goes into obtaining that information costs millions upon millions of dollars. That is incredibly valuable research, okay? And so, how you take crude oil and turn it into gasoline, once again, it's a pretty well-known thing. So they're not necessarily protecting that so tightly, but protecting oil deposit data, the confidentiality there is huge, okay? Integrity, well, when you're looking at the part about keeping the oil flowing, the oil comes out of the ground and the formula comes out of the ground in. And you have to work with it from there. And if its integrity isn't very good, then you just have to deal with that, okay? But so for that part of it, integrity is pretty minimal. Now, integrity for what leaves their factories, is the gasoline up to purity levels and so forth, that would obviously be important. Availability, that's the other one, though, keeping that oil flowing and keeping the gas flowing and keeping the product flowing to market and so forth. So if you notice here, I'm giving confidentiality and availability pretty much even slices, and integrity, really just a sliver. Now, again, it kind of depends on what part of the process you're looking at. If you're looking at where you're getting the oil out of the ground, I think that pie chart is very accurate. If you're looking at the part of the process where the gasoline, for example, is leaving the factory, the pie chart would probably need to look a little different. But there'd be more integrity concern there. But other than that, I think it's a fairly accurate representation. When we move into another type of a company, for example, Amazon. Now, here I'm talking about their Amazon's online sales. Until not that long ago, 100% of Amazon's revenue was generated with online sales. They now do have some bricks and mortar stores, of course, and we're going to see how that goes for them. You could almost predict Amazon's revenue by looking at prior years and trending analysis and so forth. I think the 2020 trending is going to just totally blow the charts off the doors. So we'll have to wait and see. But with all the pandemic and people staying home and not going to bricks and mortar stores, we just don't know what's going to happen with this. But 2019, Amazon's total revenue was 280.52 billion. Now that compares to 2018, 230 something billion. So it's been going up about that much every year. But that comes down to $533,000 per minute. If you talk to a lot of people, they would tell you that a denial of service attack is a nuisance. And I agree. A denial of service attack is absolutely a nuisance. And to Amazon, it is a $533,000 per minute nuisance. That is a pretty big nuisance. You know, if you look at Amazon Day in 2019, it was kind of a bust. There wasn't that great of sales and stuff. But 2018 Amazon Day was amazing. They had some great sales, stuff everybody wanted on sale for great prices and stuff. And there was about a 15-minute period right smack dab in the middle of Amazon Day 2018. About 15 minutes, the Amazon website went down. A popularity denial of service is what it's sometimes referred to as. So many people try to access the site that it runs out of resources and crashes. Now, you know, like I said, I don't do business with these companies, well, other than the fact that I'm a customer of some of them, but, you know, they're not my customers, so I don't have any inside knowledge here. But I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I'm gonna tell you that Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, after that 15-minute outage in the middle of Amazon Day, I'm gonna tell you he probably sat some folks down and said, this will not happen again. Okay, I could be wrong, but I kind of don't think I am. I kind of think maybe that conversation happened. So when you are looking at that, you are looking very, very much at availability being our number one concern. In other words, when you open a browser, you type in Amazon, they want to be very, very certain that that web page opens up in that browser. And you know, they don't have a web server. They have massive server farms of hundreds of web servers and multiple data centers around the country and now around the world. And so I don't know where you're at right now. I personally happen to be standing in San Antonio, where it was about 100 degrees today and about 4,000% humidity. I was outside for a very short period of time, came right back in. But you know, when I'm here in San Antonio, I open a browser, I type in Amazon. I don't happen to know where their nearest data center is. Let's just say it's up in Austin, Texas. Normally, I would connect to a data center in Austin, Texas, and I would obtain the web page from there. But that data center goes down. Maybe I'm going to connect their data center in Denver instead, and it's all automated. I don't even know this is happening. Do you think it was inexpensive to build out that kind of an infrastructure, where it's a virtual guarantee that a customer is going to see that web page every single time? There was a lot of effort, a lot of expense went into that. They had to invent something. It's called cloud computing. If you really do look at the history of cloud computing, it was pretty much invented by Amazon in order to support their business. So you know, why did they do that? Because they've got a $533,000 per minute motivation. That's basically what it comes down to. Now, they do care about the other two. Integrity, if the book is supposed to cost $100, they don't want me to buy it for $2. And the confidentiality, they want me to have to buy stuff with my credit card number, not yours. So they do care that, you know, I'm only on my own account and so forth. So they do care about the other two, okay? But for their online sales, you would absolutely wait, I think. The availability is number one without question. So when we kind of look at this, so far so good. When we bring in all of our different pie charts for all the different organizations, for some reason something didn't come in there, but everything so far is accurate and easy, okay? But it's also greatly simplified, okay? And I'll admit that. So let's take another look here, okay? So coming back to the Amazon pie chart, this is a copy and paste from earlier with one little exception. Notice up in the corner there, in the upper right-hand corner, I have underlined and changed the color for CYA in general, pointing out that up to this point, We have been talking about how I would apply the confidentiality, integrity, availability, prioritization at various companies in a general sense. But when we start taking that and we start drilling down on it a little bit, okay, let's take the same Amazon pie chart. Again, that is specific to their online sales. Keep the online purchases flowing, protect their prices and their customer data, okay? But when we bring in their cloud, the pie chart changes pretty dramatically. With cloud, availability has got to be very important. When cloud customers need to access their data, they need to access their data. They don't want to have to wait around for it. And of course, keeping the customer data confidential and protected and so forth. Their service level agreements say that they will provide a level of security, so that would make that important. But protecting the integrity of customers' data, that's more of the customer's job. That's really not Amazon's job too much, okay? So you'd see a really different pie chart looking specifically at their cloud service. And then if you were to go to their products, things like their Echo and their Kindle and so forth, now we're going to see a different chart yet. In fact, it's almost backwards of what the first chart is. Confidentiality, protecting the R&D. Was Amazon the first company to come out with an e-reader? Nope. The first well-known one was called Nook, and it came out from Barnes & Noble. And as I say, I've given this talk probably, I don't know, close to a dozen times now, and I've had between 10 and 75 people in the room when I've done this talk. And at this point, I say, how many of you have an e-reader that you read books on? And almost everybody, of course, reads their hand. And I'll say, now, how many of you have a Nook? No hands are in the air. How many of you have a Kindle? All the hands go back up. I'll occasionally get one or two hands on the Nook, but Nook was first to market, but it's not the market leader. And part of the reason is because Amazon innovated, and they made their e-reader better, and they made it the one everybody wanted. And part of that meant that they had to protect their research and development from their competitors, and that meant they had to protect the confidentiality of the R&D. Okay. Now, integrity, maintaining the product quality, their quality assurance, QA, and of course, keep the product shipping. So availability does matter. But as with pretty much any R&D, you're going to see confidentiality is going to be your number one concern. That's going to be a pretty standard thing. But notice up in the upper right corner, it's now pointing out, we're looking at the CYA by sector. Take any company, especially larger companies that operate in many different industry sectors, and you're going to see different prioritization. You're going to want to prioritize the CYA in different ways in different sectors, different parts of the company, okay? But that's by sector, okay? We can take this same concept and extend it on by department, okay? So if we go over to payroll, well, availability is going to be number one. You got to keep the paychecks going. If you stop paying people, they stop coming to work. One of the first times I did this talk, I happened to be standing in front of about 60 or 70 FBI agents, and it was during the last government shutdown, and they all kind of started laughing. So for most people, when you stop paying them, they stop coming to work, okay? So you do have to keep the paychecks flowing, okay? And they have to be accurate. I don't know if you've ever had to deal with this. I have my own company, payroll for myself and my wife. We're the only two employees, and I actually hire somebody to do it for me because we kept messing it up. It is so complex, and I'd like to think we're not dumb people, but it is so complex when you have to file this and how you have to withhold for that. And I finally just threw up my hands and asked an expert, please take care of this for me, okay? And it's the best money I've spent, okay? So the integrity on these things, the W-2s, they have got to be correct, and et cetera. The 941 checks have got to pay the correct amounts, and so I believe the list goes on. And then, like I say, the confidentiality has to matter too. In some companies in the government sector, this is a minor issue. Payroll in the government sector is public knowledge. Everybody knows what everybody gets paid. But in the private sector, that's not the case. I've actually had to sign non-disclosure agreements when I've gone to work for companies saying that I would not let my coworkers know how much I am being paid. Because if I negotiated better and I'm getting paid more than the guy sitting next to me doing the same job, they didn't want that guy to know about it. And so, confidentiality does have a play there. Not to mention, people have a right to privacy as far as their payroll goes. But so under payroll, I think that's how you would divvy the pie chart up. Under accounting in general, I think that, well, integrity has got to have the biggest slice because, again, you got to have very strong integrity with our financials. They have to be accurate and pristine. But okay, now this pie chart is going to look different in a privately held company than in a publicly held company. In a publicly held company, any company traded on the stock market, there are very, very stringent rules about when you can report what to the public as far as how your earnings are going and so forth. You have to do quarterly reports and annual reports, and those reports have to be released on a very specific day, and what you put in them is not optional. They dictate all that to you. And if you don't follow those rules, the fines can go into the millions, tens of millions, and in some cases actually hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay, so in a publicly traded company, confidentiality would need every bit of that much of that slice of the pie. Privately held company doesn't have those rules hanging over them, those potential fines. I might adjust the pie a bit there. Okay, but again, availability. The accounting data has got to be available in order for management to make decisions based on that data. So it does have its importance as well. When we move over to the human resource department, I gave a lot of thought to this one. It's the only pie, I don't know if you've caught this yet, it's the only pie in the entire presentation that is 3 equal parts. Okay, there's your triad, I guess, okay? But yeah, in the human resource department, keeping employees, information, their social security numbers, their payroll, et cetera, that would all have to be very confidential. Payroll records have got to be, maintained correctly. Again, it ties back into the integrity for payroll. And then availability. This is a mistake a lot of companies make when they're looking at their disaster recovery planning. They have their critical records program where, if the hurricanes are coming, the way it is right now in the Gulf, if the hurricanes are coming in, what critical records do we need to evacuate to make sure that they survive the disaster, and they leave human resources records out of that. And that is a massive mistake. After the hurricane, you're sitting there going, now who worked for me and what was I paying them? Okay. I have to basically walk up to the people you think work for you and go, okay, first off, what did you do for me? And second off, how much did I pay? I paid you that much? Wow. So protecting the availability of human resources records is pretty important. It really is. Okay, so that one I actually do, I had a hard time coming with anything other than 3 equal parts. I thought all 3 pieces were pretty even there. Okay, but so take that concept. Now I'm giving you 3 examples: payroll, accounting, human resources. Obviously, R&D is going to have something different. The management suite is going to have something different. Every department within the organization is going to have a different chart, a different prioritization. And where you really have to watch for the problems is, well, okay, a perfect example. In fact, perhaps I might add a slide on this one. It's come up in a couple of the talks. What happens when there's a disagreement, if you will, between basically the R&D department and the sales department? The R&D department wants to keep the new product that they just are working on developing. They want to keep it a secret so that their competitors can't steal it, but the sales department wants to go out and start selling it. Well, you kind of have to tell your customer something about the product if you're going to sell them the product. And so those two wind up at odds with each other on a pretty regular basis. And that's when security has to step in and be the mediator. Okay. It's pretty much how that has to work. Okay. But, there I was using Amazon's payroll, accounting, and human resources as an example. I pick any company. I don't care. I really don't think you're going to change the pie charts too awful much when you go from one company to another. As I said, the accounting pie chart would change a little bit from a publicly traded company to a privately held company, but other than that, these pie charts are probably going to stay pretty static for everyone involved. Okay. Now, a final thought here. My original plan for this talk, when I was very first putting it together, I was going to have right here at least one example that gave 0 priority weight to one of the 3, either the C, the I, or the A. I was going to give you one example, and I racked my brains. I called every friend I have in this industry, and after 35 years, I have a few. And I can't come up with it. Okay. Like any good pie, you've got to have all the ingredients. And I could not come up with a really, truly good example of where you wouldn't want at least this, a little bit of the C, the I, and the A: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You need all 3 in every time. Okay. I've had a couple of people propose, like one individual, for example, said that he worked for a while in construction. That's a career I never had. And he said the blueprints. Once you're on the job site, the blueprints, anybody can see them. But after I started talking with him a little bit, I said, so if I work for your biggest competitor, I'm able to walk onto the job site and see the blueprints? And he's going, well, no, we wouldn't let you on the job site if you work for our competitor. Okay, so the confidentiality is still being protected there. It's just that anyone they do allow on the job site is allowed to see them. So, and of course, we went on to talk further. While the blueprints are being created, they're closely guarded secrets. So, as I say, when you really dig into them, I've had a few people make some proposals in the various talks that I've done, but as we talked about them, they agreed that, yeah, no, there's at least a little piece of one of the 3 in every example. Okay. So kind of in summary, okay, stop focusing on the CYA as a triad. I used the phrase earlier, it is an unattainable ideal. And that statement comes from years of trying to make it work as a triad and failing in every case because, once again, Keith's perfect world, everybody gets 800% of their staffing request, 900% of their budget request. That's not where we live. We live in the real world. 50% of our staffing request, 20% of our budget request. We don't have the resources to obtain that ideal. We just can't do it. So a bad to-do list of do everything. Now let's have a good priority, a good to-do list. Prioritize. Instead of trying to look at the CYA as a triad of 3 equal parts, start looking at the CYA as a method of prioritization. And my experience shows that if you do that, if you apply it to your company in general, then the industry sectors at your organization, if you have a large organization, so you're in more than one industry sector, all the way down to the department level, and use it as a method to figure out what are the priorities for each of these departments and industry sectors and so forth. And when you do it that way, the CYA takes you a long way. As I said at the beginning, it's not the CYA's fault. CYA, confidentiality, integrity, availability. I still believe we need to protect all 3. I hope nothing in this talk has led you to think that I think otherwise. But I don't think we can apply it as a triad. I think we can apply it as prioritization. Now, with that, as you can tell by this slide, we've come to the end of the slides, and I'm ready to take any questions you might want to throw into the chat room here. Feel free. Carol?
Keith,
I'm attempting to type into that. I'm attempting to type into the questions window, and are there questions in there? I don't see anything.
Yes, I agree. I'm not seeing any questions either.
Okay. I tried to type in it, it wouldn't let me, so I'm hoping that someone is able to type into it. I will say, do keep in mind that you have my email address, keith@netip.com. If for some reason you're unable to type into the questions window, I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But if indeed you're unable to type your questions here and would like them answered, feel free to email me, and I will get back to you just as quickly as I possibly can with the best answer I can. Even if it comes down, sometimes I'll get a question from a student, and the best way to answer it is, let's get a phone call, and more recently Zoom, and I've answered a few questions that way. But
I am seeing a couple in the questions window now, not the chat window, but the questions window.
I'm not seeing either.
Okay. The first one says, should the http tinyurl.com ch37 OAT take you to a safe browsing extension?
Yes, that's a good question. You do want to be careful with these shortened URLs. It's a very good point. So tinyurl.com/ch37OAT, notice that is a lowercase o. That takes you to a Dropbox folder I have shared with the world, the same place the QR code takes you, by the way. It's a Dropbox folder I have shared with the world. I only put things up there if I'm okay with everybody having them. And so I put like this talk, if you would like to download it from there. Carol, I believe you're also going to make it available for download too, I think. But this talk, I do 3 or 4 other night talks. Those are up there, and a ton of other stuff that I've put up there through the years.
All right, thanks. Yes, I put in the chat window that a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. So someone else says, great presentation. And the last question I see is a quick question. Is this triad valid for mission critical infrastructure?
Well, first, the point of the talk is that it's not a triad, it's a method of prioritization. But would this method of prioritization be valid for mission critical infrastructure, if I understand the question correctly? Yeah, this is any place where you're going to implement security. I think this, when you are faced with an insurmountable challenge, you have to figure out how to surmount it. One of my favorite quotes, one of my other night talks, is the 14 absolute truths of security. And the 14th absolute truth of security says that a problem without a solution is not a problem. It is a reality to be dealt with. That came from Anwar Sadat. But security has become a problem without a solution. It is a reality we have to deal with. We do not have the budget. We do not have the manpower, the staffing. We are always going to be shorthanded and under budget. And that means that we have to figure out a way to prioritize and make sure that we are implementing the right things and using making the best use of the limited resources we do have. And that's why I'm such a huge advocate of taking the CYA, and instead of trying to look at it as an unattainable ideal of a triad, looking at it as a method of prioritizing our security program. So yes, whether it's, pretty much everything's mission critical anymore, but whether you're looking at a mission critical or anything else, basically if you're trying to implement security, I think this still has validity. Other questions?
That's all I see, Keith. You can take it from here.
Okay, I'm not sure why I'm not seeing them in the chat window. Also, Carol, I hope I get a copy of the recording. I've never really heard myself talk before. I hope you guys have enjoyed the talk here. CYA by using CIA, but using it correctly for a change, and kind of taking one of our industry's accepted norms, conventional wisdom, that CIA should be applied as 3 equal parts, turning it on its ear and basically saying it's absolutely wrong. And I have had some people firmly disagree with me on this. And then, as I said at the beginning, that's okay. But I honestly do believe it's better used as a method of prioritization. I hope you've come away with an understanding of that. I hope you have something here you're able to take back to the office tomorrow, or you're working from home, or whatever it happens to be, your next security implementation, let's put it that way. And something that will help you to prioritize the resources you have available to you. With that, I'm going to thank you very much for your time. I'm sure each and every one of you have something else you would rather be doing right about now, so I'll go ahead and let you go. But thank you for your time, and I hope you've enjoyed it.